Hey everyone, thank you for watching the first lesson of our Nostr Dev course where we learned what's Nostr. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to build our first basic Nostr application, just showing you the nuts and bolts of how Nostr works and what you're going to be doing in future lessons. You ready? Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need to do, as you can see on my screen here, we've got a tiny URL. And this tiny URL, if you open it up in your browser, that's just going to take you straight to this very workshop slideshow that I'm showing you right now. And that's going to be important because as we go through it, there's going to be parts where we're like copy pasting code from the slideshow into our project. So it's good to have it open so you can like do that. So get out a browser, and while you're sitting here, open up that link. And then the second thing you might want to take a look at is this GitHub. So this GitHub repository contains an example of a version of this workshop I did before, and it shows exactly what we're going to be building. It's got a video of me doing this before, it's got a link to the slideshow, it's got some information about other things you can do to learn about Nostr, and if you click this link up here, this, my friends, this beautiful application right here is what we're going to be building today. Now, you might look at this and be like, there's nothing on there, Super Testnet, and you'd be right, because everything that's in here is going on here in the console. And you can see some of the things we're going to do. We're going to connect to a relay. Here I'm using relay.taxi. We're going to create a public key. That's what this thing is up here. And then we're going to do a bunch of stuff with events and subscriptions and all this stuff that you don't know how it works yet. But great, that's what we're going to build. And then, of course, if this is a real application, it would actually do stuff in the content field over here. But yeah, that's what we're going to build today, and we're going to learn how Nostr works while we do it. So might want to pull those two things up. Now that we're all situated, I just want to go over a couple of things, a rehash from in the last episode. You probably learned that Nostr is it means notes and other stuff transmitted by relays. You learned how it's a simple protocol for censorship-resistant social networks, but also for more, like social networking is just one of the cool things you can do with it. And another important concept you should have learned last time is about data storage and retrieval, because that's what we're really going to be focused on today. We're going to do some data storage and retrieval and just see how that works in our little basic application. And then, of course, you can apply this to social media, but you can also apply it to any other thing you're building as a developer. I also wanted to do a little refresher on the client-server model, because here we're actually going to be building a client. Not a server. We're not going to be doing anything with relays today other than connecting to one. So if that's what you're expecting, that'll come in a future lesson in this course. So just want to remind you that over here I've got two clients. They're represented by the cell phones, and then we've got a server in the middle. Clients, of course, what we're going to be building, they create notes. Servers save them, so that's what's represented by this little dialogue between the phone and the computer. And then time goes by and other clients request events from the server. So yeah, we're building a client today. We're going to be doing the thing where we create a note over on the left side, and then we get a note over on the right side. And I'm also going to show you how encryption works. So that's what we're going to be building. And then just one more refresher about WebSockets. We're going to be using a lot of WebSockets today. So just as a reminder, a WebSocket creates a two-way connection between you and the server, between our client that we're going to be building and the relay that we're talking to. And then we can send and receive data over that wire without needing to reconnect and reestablish an HTML connection or an HTTP connection to our server. We get a persistent one. And that's the beauty of WebSockets, is get one connection and then you can very rapidly send information over them. And we'll be using that a lot. Okay, so there's a little refresher, and are you guys ready to build your first Nostr application? I hope so, because it's time to dig in. Let's do it. All right, as you may have noticed in past episodes of Super Testnet, I very often build things directly in the browser. I very often just pump things straight into an HTML document and then view them, and that's what we're going to be doing. I just love developing in the browser. So in order to do this, I have to copy the code from right here, and we're going to create a working directory and create a HTML file in there. So I'm going to open up my File Explorer and create a new folder in here. And what are we going to call it? How about we do Basic Nostr App? That's a good name for it. Open up that directory, and here we need to create a file, create a text file, or a HTML file rather. So I'm going to create, I'm going to call it index.html. That's what I always do. I recommend, that's a really good name for a file if you're looking for one. And then I'm just going to open it up in Sublime. That's the text editor I typically use. And look at that. We've got a nice little file to work with. Now, you don't have to use Sublime. You can use VS Code if you're more familiar with that. You can use Microsoft Notepad. I don't know what you want to use, but just something where you can edit text and save HTML files. That's what we're going to be doing here. And so let's get started. I'm going to pop in the code I just copied and open this up in Firefox. That's my browser. Of course, you can use whatever browser you want. And look, we're already most of the way there. We got a blank application just like the one I showed you earlier. Of course, in the console over here, nothing's going on there. In case you're not familiar with how to open up your console, at least in Firefox, and it's also this way in Chrome, you can do Control-Shift-I, and that'll pop this thing up for you. And you can use that to debug stuff, or in our case, to just view the output of the code we're going to be writing. You can also, if Control-Shift-I doesn't work for you because you're in a browser that doesn't use that shortcut, you can usually find it under More Tools, Web Developer Tools, or you can click Browser Console right there. Either one will open this up. But this is where we're going to be examining our code. So make sure you can pull that up, and we'll be good. Next thing is to do put some content in there. We're going to be using Bitcoin.js as well as a elliptic curve library called NobleSecP256K1, which is a mathematical thing. So just copy those and put them into the head section right there. Save it and refresh our page. Make sure there's no errors. We would get a little red bar in here if there was an error, but there are none. And let me talk about what these libraries do. So we got two libraries here. The Bitcoin.js library is going to give us a bunch of stuff for dealing with private keys and public keys. And you might wonder, why are we dealing with private keys and public keys, or why are we using a Bitcoin library in a Nostr project? So Nostr was, of course, developed by a Bitcoin developer. And basically, we kind of reuse tools that we are familiar with. At least that's how I do stuff. So I imagine that when he was creating this, he's like, well, I know I need, public keys and private keys to make this messaging application, so I'm going to use tools that I'm familiar with. And he used Bitcoin's libraries for that. Also, the NobleSecP256K1 library comes with stuff for doing Diffie-Hellman encryption stuff, and we're going to use that later. So I also throw that one in there because it's got better tools for that than the Bitcoin.js one. Those are the libraries you're going to need, and that's why we're using them. So feel free to just copy those straight in, and if you're making an application later, you can use those or you can use other ones, whatever libraries you're more comfortable with. These are the ones I use. All right, next step in our next section of our thing here, let's create a private key and a public key. Okay, so I'm doing this in JavaScript, and so I decided when I was writing this little workshop that I would put this script tag in the body of my document. And JavaScript doesn't really care where you put stuff, because JavaScript's very flexible. So you can put it wherever you want. But here I'm going to put it in the body of my document. And so now I've got some more stuff. Let's take a look in here, and we'll dive in and see what we're doing. So we open up the crypto tool, which we get from our browser. Has a built-in crypto tool. And we're going to use a random number generator that we get from that crypto tool to make random numbers. Then we've got a SHA-256 library, which we're getting from Bitcoin.js. We're making a key pair from Bitcoin.js, and these are really the critical lines right here. Key pair, priv key, pub key. Key pairs are really important in Nostr. This is how we authenticate ourselves and make sure that it's us who's signing messages and not somebody else. So yeah, that's what we're going to be using throughout this, and these are the really critical lines from here. We're using Bitcoin.js to create a random key pair for us, and then we're going to assign the private key to this variable and the public key to this variable. One thing that makes Nostr a bit different from Bitcoin, or at least Bitcoin before the Taproot upgrade, is that we're using, I'm not sure what the term is. We're taking our public key and shortening it. So with shortened public keys. In Bitcoin, we usually use public keys that start with a byte that tells you whether it is even or odd. And in Nostr, we just cut that off because we actually don't need to know in Nostr whether it's even or odd. So yeah, that is what we're using here. That's why we have this substring 2 here that removes the first 2 characters from our string, because we don't need them for Nostr. Okay, so cool. That is what we're going to be using. Let's refresh our app and make sure there are no errors. Hey, we got something cool. We got a public key out here. Yeah, man, things are working. And we're not saving our public key, so every time I refresh this page, you're going to see it changes every time. Let me make that a little bigger so you can see it on the screen. Yeah, changes every time because we're not storing anything. If this were a real Nostr application, most of the time, especially if it's something like social, you're probably not going to want your users to get a new identity every time they come to your website. So maybe save that somewhere. But just for showing people the basics, I think it's fine to just create a new identity every time. That way you don't have to worry about accidentally importing stuff and stuff like that. Okay, so we did that. We've created a key pair, private key, public key. We are well on our way to having a complete Nostr application. Next thing we're going to do is relays. And this is one of my favorite things about Nostr. You would think that like doing all this client server stuff, which is like, networking is this really complicated thing in computer science. You'd think it'd be really hard, but in Nostr, we're just using WebSockets. They're already built into your browser. It's a super easy thing to use. So we really just got to take these 2 lines of code, a mere 2 lines, and pop them into our code somewhere. I'm going to put them right here, right at the bottom of my previous line of code. And now when I refresh, well, we have a connection to a relay. It doesn't show anything because I didn't tell it to do anything with that connection. But if I go into my network tab, you can actually see we have a connection to this relay right here. So that's pretty cool. You can get little bits of information about your connection right there. But yeah, that is, we got a connection. We're connected to a relay. We can start sending and receiving data. Nostr's amazing. It only took 2 lines of code. Really cool. I love this stuff. If you want to use other relays, you don't have to use relay.taxi. And the free ones tend to go up and down all the time. So I recommend you take a look at something like, that website doesn't work anymore. Something like nostr.watch is a good example of where you can find a list of Nostr relays. So check that out if you want to see more of them. And maybe in the future, if you're looking at this, you're looking to discover some relays and the one I'm using isn't working anymore, you can use a website like this one to find other relays that you can use. And you just pick one that has a green dot next to it and doesn't have any errors, and that's what you're going to want to use. But I'm sure in the future there'll be many websites for finding good Nostr relays. So nostr.watch is one that works right now. Next thing we're going to do is, now that we have a connection to a relay, we would like to tell that relay, tell our client what to do if a message comes in. Because what if that relay sends us some information? We probably want to display it to our user somehow and let them know, hey, you got a message, right? Sounds pretty decent. So that's what this code does right here. I'm just going to pop this into our code, and let me tell you what it does. So this creates something called an event listener on our WebSocket. We've got a connection to our relay. We're going to listen for events. Sounds simple enough that Nostr uses events. We're listening for them. Simple, right? I hope you're with me. This is the easy stuff. We're going to get into the hard stuff a little bit later. So what's it going to do? Well, Nostr events have a number of different attributes to them. Like they have the type, they have the subscription ID, they have the event attribute, kind, content. Lots of stuff is in a Nostr event which we're going to show you more about as we get into them. But what this is doing is it's pulling out all of those different attributes, and then it's checking if it's a valid event. Because one thing about Nostr is it's a public network. People can send all kinds of stuff through the network, and sometimes it's not valid stuff. Sometimes people will send invalid things. Your relay, if it's not designed well, may not even check if it's a valid event or not, or maybe it's using a different protocol, or it allows extensions to it or something. So we check if it's a valid event or not with this line right here. If there is no event, we return and stop listening. Or if the event is just identical to the string true, to the Boolean value true, then we get out of that one as well, because that's not a valid event. A valid event has information in it. So yeah, that's what we're doing right there. And then if we do get a valid event, we console log it. That's what we're going to do. If the relay sends us anything, we're just going to tell the user what they told him. Pretty simple. Then this part right here where it talks about if kind equals 4, then decrypt it. That's going to come when we do the encryption and decryption stuff later. Optionally in Nostr, you can encrypt and decrypt stuff. And then after we get that, we're just going to relay or tell the user what the content of their message is. So that's what this is doing. If we refresh our app, what should we see? Let's go to the console. We still just see our pub key. Does that mean the code's not working? No, it doesn't mean the code's not working. The code's ready now to receive a message, but no one sent us anything. This identity has just been created. There's no one knows about it, so no one's trying to talk to us right now. But we'll start sending out messages and then receiving them in just a bit. So are you ready to move on? Let's do it. Do the next thing. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit more information to where we're actually going to start talking to our relay and telling it that we want information. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to subscribe. We're going to send a subscription message to the relay and tell it, hey, Mr. Relay, if I tell you anything, tell me what I told you. Like, we're just going to do a little echo here as a basic explanation of how Nostr works. I want to do an echo where we tell the relay something and it just tells us what we told it. Very basic. So that is what we're going to put right here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the terms in here. So we've got something called a subscription ID. We're creating a variable called sub ID, and I'm using Bitcoin's private key function to create this subscription ID. What are subscription IDs? Well, as we get along in Nostr, we connect to typically many relays, and when we connect to them, we start sending them requests for information, and these are called subscriptions. Well, you might have 6 or 7 subscriptions out there in the Nostrverse, all trying to give you information. So to each subscription, we attach a subscription ID, which needs to be unique. It needs to be unique among all of the ones we've created. That way, if information comes back, the relay will tell us what subscription ID it's responding to, and then we can distinguish them. Because if you've got 5 or 6 or 7 that your app is trying to do different things depending on each one, your app is going to need to know which one is giving you information. So the subscription ID helps you do that. In my app here, I'm using Bitcoin's private key function to generate the identifier for it, because Bitcoin's private key function will always give us a unique random value. But in fact, I'm going to further refine this, and I'm only going to take the first 16 characters from that private key so that it's not super long. There's no reason to send a full 32 bytes to a relay and then use some of that bandwidth on our wire when we really only just need a small identifier for our event or for our subscription. Okay, so that's what the sub ID is doing. It's making sure that we have unique identifiers for each of our subscriptions. This comes into play more when you're talking to multiple relays. The next thing you're going to see on here is a filter. And a filter lets you do all sorts of stuff with Nostr events. It lets you tell the relay, don't send me everything. Just send me, in this case, events by this author. Or maybe you could send me events that are of a certain kind. Like I want to see events that are kind of like Twitter posts, or I want to see blog posts, or something like that. The filter event tells the relay what information you want it to give you. So the other thing we're going to do down here is when we connect to the relay, we create this open message. It's an event listener called open, and if our app learns that we have an open connection to the relay, it's going to run the code inside of this event listener, right? It's going to tell us, first of all, you're connected to this relay. It's going to tell us what relay we're connected to. Then it's going to create our subscription, log it for us, and fire it off to the relay. Say, hey, Mr. Relay, now that I'm connected to you, this is the information I want you to give me. All right? So let's see how it looks. Down here it says close this bracket. We're going to put more stuff in here later. We have to close it for now, otherwise it'll give us an error. But we're going to put more stuff in here, so keep that available. Save, refresh our page, and no errors. Cool. In fact, we even get something better. We get information. We connected to our relay, and now our app is telling us about it, saying, hey, you connected to a relay, and here is a subscription you sent off to it that's saying, hey, I am requesting information. That's the REQ right there. I'm requesting information. Here's my subscription ID. So if your relay gives you information, this subscription ID is going to be part of what it gives you back, so you can identify where you sent that information from. And then it gives us then it's telling us what we're listening for. We are listening for information by this author, and there's a pub key in here. Well, where's that pub key come from? Look up at the top. That's our pub key. We're subscribing to ourselves, because this is an echo program. Just if we say something, then the relay is going to see it got a message from this pub key we subscribe to, and so it's going to give us that information right back to us. So normally in a Nostr application, you probably will subscribe to yourself. People love to see things that they themselves have said. But more likely, you're also going to want to subscribe to your friends, subscribe to your family members, subscribe to whoever they follow if it's a social media application. So you'll need to adjust this. You don't just want to subscribe likely to your own public key. In a normal application, you probably subscribe to many people's pub keys. But that's where they go. Okay, so we are connected to a relay. We're listening for messages that we ourselves send. Let's move on and keep doing the next part. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to prepare a public note for signing. And let me show you a little bit about public notes. So there's quite a bit of information here. You can see we're creating an event with pub key, with a timestamp, with a kind that identifies it. There's lots of information that goes into Nostr events, and you can find more information about it by visiting this link right here. This is the Nostr NIPs, Nostr implementation possibilities. They are guidelines for how to make Nostr applications and best practices, or at least practices that other people are following, so you can be cross-compatible. And this tells you lots of information, NIP 1 does, about Nostr events, about their structure. Of course, as you learned from Topher's class, Nostr events are just JSON objects. Very, very familiar to any programmer. He's going to be very familiar with JSON objects. And yeah, this is their structure. You've got an identifier for the event. You've got the pub key of the person who created that event. You've got when it was created. A kind that identifies whether it's a blog post or a Twitter post or a video or whatever it is that you're putting on Nostr. You got tags so that you can reference people or reference other events or give more information about your event. Then you've got a content field, which has the content of your event. And finally, you've got a signature, which we use to authenticate that this public key is the one who sent this message. So that's the basic structure of a Nostr event. And then we can see most of that content in our code over here, which I haven't yet put into our app. Let's do that. It says put this right above your closing script tag. So put it right here. Save that. So we've got an event here, or a function here called getSignedEvent. And we're going to pass it an event that we create along with our private key. And what's it going to do? Well, it's going to assign that a version number of 0, because we're still on the very first version of Nostr events. It's going to write down our public key, when the event was created. It's going to do all this stuff. After it creates the structured event, it's going to get its ID by using the SHA-256 function, and then it's going to get a signature for that event and return it to us. So that's a really useful function. This will give us the information that we're going to send to the relay and say, here's an event. Please, if anyone asks for events by me, give them this. Give them this. This is one of the things I've created to be publicly available on Nostr. GetSignedEvent. Very nice function. Let's refresh our page, make sure there's no errors. Cool, no errors. We still just are connecting to a relay and requesting information about ourselves, any post that we post. We haven't posted anything yet, though, so it's not telling us anything. Cool. Let's do one. Now that we have a function for creating an event, let's actually make one. Now this one, it says put this stuff inside the open event listener from earlier. So we have to do this. When I used to make Nostr applications, I would make a mistake here because I would accidentally put this stuff just anywhere. Like I might put it down here. It's important to only fire off an event after you have a connection to a relay. So we're going to do that by going into our open relay dialog here. All the code inside of open only fires once you have a connection to a relay established. And so that'll save you some trouble later. That'll save you from some errors. Only start talking to relays once you're connected to one. Yeah, makes sense? Cool. So what are we going to do in here? Well, we're going to create an event, and it's going to have some simple content. We're just going to say, this workshop is awesome. If you're following along, you can change this to whatever you want to say as your first Nostr developer message. Then we've got a created at. We're going to create a timestamp for this. We're using the date function. It's built into JavaScript. It'll give you a Unix timestamp of your current, of whatever time it currently is. And we're dividing that by 1,000 because JavaScript gives them in milliseconds and Nostr wants them in regular seconds. So we divide the milliseconds by 1,000 to get regular seconds. And then we floor it because we don't want any leftover, 0.156 or whatever milliseconds. So we put it all down to 0. So that's what we're doing. We're creating a timestamp. We're using a regular kind1 post. This is the kind that's equivalent to a Twitter tweet. And we're not going to put any tags in our event because this is a very basic one. We're not referencing anyone or talking to any particular person. We're just putting a public message out there. And then we have our pub key, which is who's writing this event. It's us, right? So putting our pub key in there. Then we're going to pass that event to the getSignedEvent function that we just created, along with our private key. And it's going to return to us a signed event, which we are then going to pass to our relay. So let's try it and refresh the page. Whoa, we got new stuff. Awesome. So now our content, or our console, is starting to fill up with content. We've got our public key at the top. We've got our connection to our relay. We know about our subscription. It's telling us basic information about that. And now we've got a signed event object, which says, hey, you've created an event here, which says this workshop is awesome, gives us the current Unix timestamp for when we created this event, gives us our public key, the ID of the event, a signature. All this stuff is just kind of, this ID and signature are kind of like random information, or at least, it's not really human readable. But this is actually how events are referenced on the Nostr network. They're referenced by their ID, and they're authenticated by their signature. So it's pretty cool stuff, even though it's not really human readable. Like, this is how Nostr works. This is how we make it a secure platform for public communication. And then here's our actual message. This is what we fired off to the relay. It's pretty much the same thing as this structured object, but now the relay has it, which is cool. And then the relay, it bounced us back a message. Because we told the relay, hey, if you see anything by this author being us, tell us the content, right? So here comes the relay knocking on our door and saying, hey, I got a message for you. It says this workshop is awesome, and you wrote it. So yeah, so it's working. We're talking to a relay, and we're getting information back, and the world is awesome, and Nostr's great. Okay, so we've done most of the stuff we set out to do. We've connected to a relay. We've fired off a message. You've learned about the JSON structure of a Nostr event. One thing we haven't done yet is do encryption. So on this page, I'm going to. This is just to make sure we're all on the same page. We should all see, this workshop is awesome in our console, and if we see that, we're on the same page. But let's move on and learn how to do encrypted messages. Because that's one of the cool things about Nostr. It's really great for public communication, but you can also encrypt stuff so that if you send someone something, no one else can see the content of your message. So let's take a look at how that works. In order to do encryption, I'm going to use a library from Node.js called Cypher. And we're using this in the browser, so it's been run through the Browserify application, which is a Node.js application that takes things that were designed for running on servers and makes it so they can run in browsers as well. So we're just going to pop this into the head of our document so that we can use this cool crypto stuff. There we go. Now we can encrypt and decrypt things. But in order to do that, we need some functions, because encryption is not the easiest thing in the world. So I got a couple of functions here called hex to bytes and bytes to hex. These are dependencies for the encryption function I'm going to use. And what they do is they take bytes, which are raw pieces of data that are often used in encryption, and they turn them into hexadecimal, which is another thing that's often used. They're just needed for converting between different data types. So we're going to put this right above our closing script tag, right down here. And now we can convert between those data formats. There's one more we need. We need base64. Base64 is often used for sending raw data to somebody, but in a more compressed way, because you've got a bigger alphabet than you have in hexadecimal. So this is another one we just need it for doing the encryption stuff we're doing. So we'll pop that right in to the bottom of our script tag. And now we have all the dependencies we need. We just need the encrypt function and the decrypt function. Okay, so this looks like a mess. Well, it's encryption. It's one of the most complicated things that I've ever personally done as a developer. So it is rather messy, but I'll try to give you a basic explanation of what you're doing when you're encrypting stuff. Basic overview. So first of all, we need to get a key. So this gets a when you encrypt something, you often want to encrypt it to a public key, so that the person who has the private key to that thing, to that public key, can then decrypt it. And then you just kind of exchange messages back and forth. They'll send stuff to your public key, you send stuff to their public key. In Nostr, we do that, but we do shared keys. So we're going to create a key that you and and whoever you're talking to both know the private key to it. And then we're going to talk using that one. That way, in the future, I can decrypt messages that I sent you. And like if we're making a chat client or something, it's important that you not only see the messages they sent to you, but also be able to see the messages you sent to them. So by using a shared key, or a shared secret as it's called here, we can do that. So that's what that line is doing. Then it's getting random values, which are called initialization vectors. These ensure that if you type the same message twice, the initialization vector will modify it so that so there's like padding on the end, and that way it'll be encrypted differently every time. So that's what that line's doing. Then we got the cipher function, which is just we're creating a cipher. A cipher is a type of encryption, which we're getting from that library. We're encrypting our message, putting it in base 64 so that it's compressed and doesn't take up a lot of space, or at least as little space as we can. Then we're going to run that through the cipher function, and it's going to pop out an array buffer, which we're going to put into base 64 and send off, and it's a bunch of multiplication. That's what you need to know about encryption. I don't really know how encryption works. I know that you take bytes and you multiply them by weird things, and magic happens, and now it's encrypted. So that's what's going on with the encrypt function. Now we can do encrypted messages. The other thing we need is a decrypt function, which of course is just the reverse of encryption. So if you look at this function, it's very similar to the other one. It's just, let me put it in here. It's getting the initialization vector in the encrypted message out of our Nostr event. It's recreating the shared key that we use for communicating with people. It's passing the text through the decrypt function or the decipher function from browserify cipher, giving us the hex of it, converting it back from base 64, undoing all the multiplication we did earlier, and then it returns the decrypted message. So it's a pretty simple function once you understand how encryption works, but I don't really know how encryption works, so don't ask me. Okay, cool. Now we've got our encrypt function, our decrypt function. We can convert between all the data types. All we need to do now is make an encrypted message. So we're going to do this once again inside of that open event listener from earlier, because we don't want to send off a message before we have a connection. So put this up here, and we're going to just fire off an encrypted message. Sorry, I need this part. Stick it right here. And now we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. Earlier we created a message that said this workshop is awesome. Now we're going to create a message that says this message is super secret. We're going to pass it through our encrypt function, fire it off to ourselves. Now here the tag comes into play. Or actually two things come into play. We have a kind, which is different from before. Before we were using kind 1, those are public posts. Encrypted messages in Nostr, we have a couple different kinds for them, but the original one is kind 4. And so if you're making an encrypted message, mark it as kind 4. That way relays know, if someone's waiting for an encrypted message from you, they can send them all kind 4 events. And then we got tags. So in a tag, you specify various things, like if you're replying to a message, you'll reference the message. Here we're sending an encrypted message to someone, so we put their public key right there, saying who we're talking to, and we're talking to ourselves. We're just going to send an encrypted message to ourselves, so we put our own public key right here in the tag, and then we sign it with our own private key and fire it off, and let's see what it looks like. Refresh the page. Awesome, it worked. So once again, we've got a full content here. All the stuff, or most of the stuff, is the same as before because we're still creating a public key, still connecting to the relay, still reviewing our subscription information, creating a signed event that says this workshop is awesome, and it's still sending us back, that you said this workshop is awesome. But now there's new stuff because now we're creating an encrypted event. And if you look at this one, this is a little different because here our JSON object has a content field that's all scrambled, right? That's what encryption does. It takes our simple message, which is this message is super secret, and it scrambles it and turns it into a mumbo-jumbo mess. But the cool thing is we can decrypt that because that's what this function up here is doing. If our relay sees that we send a message, it's still going to give it to us because we subscribe to everything by ourselves. But if it's a kind 4 event, we're going to pass it through our decrypt function, where it's going to where we pass in the public key of the guy who sent it, which is us, the private key of us who's receiving it, and then the content, which is the gobbledygook right here, that stuff, and it's going to decrypt it for us. So this will throw you off in the future. When you use this in the future, make sure you change this variable right here. You'll want to put in the public key of whoever messaged you. Which you can actually get by doing this. Event.pubkey will also work. In fact, this is what you should use, event.pubkey. I'm going to change it in here as well. Because then, if you use the event.pubkey, it won't throw an error by just always trying to decrypt it with your public key. It'll use the public key of whoever sent you the message. So, whoever you're talking to. So put it in there, and now we're good. We can save this, and that's what it's doing. What we've learned here is how to connect to a Nostr relay, send a public message out, and send a private message out. There are also, so that's basically the end of our presentation here. You can see the message is super secret. We should all see that. We saw it in our console, so we're all on the same page there. But I do want to go over a couple of best practices before we close out. Connect to multiple relays. This is something that I don't usually teach when I'm doing a basic Nostr app, because when you're just doing the nuts and bolts, it's a lot to try and do this with multiple relays all talking to you at once. But Nostr's not cool unless you do multiple relays. Like, that's the whole secret sauce of Nostr is the redundancy and the ease with which you can switch from one relay to another. Do this with multiple at the same time. That way there's a backup of all your data. You don't want to be like just talking to one relay and then he goes down and all your data's gone forever. The whole reason we put data portability into Nostr is to get around the problem of central servers removing access to your data. But the way we solve it is through talking to multiple relays at the same time. So make sure if you want to do some homework for next time that you try and modify this code so that instead of just one relay, you have multiple, and then you're talking to multiple and sending multiple out and getting information back from them. That's the hard part of Nostr, is like if you get a bunch of identical messages from these people and you have to sort them and only display one to the user, it gets tricky. But by learning how to do it the right way from the beginning, you'll be a better developer in the future. So just to close out, we created our Nostr application, we connected to a Nostr relay, learned how to listen for public as well as private notes, learned how to send public and private notes, and now it's your turn. Go ahead and you make something great. You will teach you a lot of the things you need to know to make a great application, but I hope you've learned a little something from this one. Thank you for watching.